Hello friends, this is Todd Wilson. I'm the publisher of the Lake City Reporter, and welcome to our Candidate Forum 2024. We're here today with the candidates running for Columbia County Sheriff. We're here today with Sheriff Mark Hunter on our left and challenger Mr. Wallace Kitchings. Both gentlemen are running for the office of Columbia County Sheriff. Today we're going to spend roughly a half hour with these gentlemen answering questions about the race, about the campaign, and about their goals for the Columbia County Sheriff's Office in the upcoming term. This forum is brought to you taped. It is not live, but this video and their comments are unedited and played in their entirety. We hope everyone enjoys this. Once this video starts, I will be the voice asking the questions behind the camera. So we hope everyone enjoys their responses and that everyone will get out and vote. Early voting begins August the 10th, so we hope everyone will get out and exercise their freedoms and vote either early or on election day. So without further ado, hope everyone enjoys our Candidate Forum 2024 with our Columbia County Sheriff's candidates, Sheriff Mark Hunter and Wallace Kitchings. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Mr. Kitchings won the coin toss we had, and he agreed to defer going first. And Mr. Hunter, that means you get the first question, and that is, what is your top priority if you're reelected to office? What's your top priority in the next term for you?
Well, to continue what we've been building on since I've been elected. You know, when you look at the overall sheriff's office and the accomplishments, it's pretty phenomenal. In the immediate future, we're looking at the accreditation for the jail. And, you know, that's important. I'm the first sheriff to actually get the law enforcement slice accredited through the state accreditation process. And this is outside agencies inspecting us on a set of business practices that are approved standard operating procedures. The jail, of course, is a big part of the sheriff's office. It's not all about just law enforcement, and what it does is it holds us to a higher standard. That's one of the things. The other thing too is ensuring that we embrace this new technology. And the technologies that are out there, which we already have a lot of it in place, but as everyone knows, technology is ever evolving. We started off this past year with getting the flock cameras in, and I know that over the past few years, when people think about what we've been through, you know, rebuilding, we've been on the process of rebuilding the agency. And I think that's important for people to understand. It's not just Columbia County, but law enforcement across the board took a pretty good hit after COVID and the defund the police movement. So we're well on our way back to rebuilding the agency, making sure that we've got compensation for our employees, and making sure that we build a good team that we can respond to the community needs.
I want to follow up a little bit on that. When you talk about the jail certification, all that, is that things you need funds for? Is that just a procedural issue? Go into a little more detail. What has to happen for that accreditation?
There's a set of standards, and this is something else that just in the last, several years, the Model Jail Standards Committee has come on board. A lot of people don't understand the history about the jail, and again, that's part of being sheriff, is operating that jail where we have care, custody, and control of the people that we have to house. There's standards that we have to operate under, federal guidelines and state guidelines. Several years back, the DOC used to do the jail inspections. They took that from them and put it under the Sheriff's Association. Well, since that time, they formed a committee called the Model Jail Standards Committee. With that, you've got a set of standards that you operate under. However, the accreditation is the best business practices to operate a jail under, and you're inspected from an outside entity. There is some funding requirements for that. I've already got that in place. We are scheduled to start, we've already started with our policy reviews, that's in place. And we plan on, the target date is October of 25 to have the jail accredited. this sets the standard for us. And we will be a fully accredited sheriff's offices, first time in the history of the sheriff's office.
Mr. Kitchings, the same question for you. When you're elected, what will be your top priority once you're elected to office? You take office day one, and then what steps will you take to make that priority occur?
The first priority is to go in, evaluate, find out where you're at. You can't go forward till you know where you're at. Once you determine where you're at, you plot the way forward. The main thing that we've got to do in this county is get the stigma off of it, that it is the most either one or two, depending on which publication you read or Google. You have to get that stigma off this county and get it back to where the people feel safe here, where your economic development increases. Economic development is important because I have kids here, I'm gonna have grandkids here, and I want them to have, good paying jobs. I want the county to flourish. If we don't do that, your tourism's gonna take a hit, your economic development, and some of these builders or developers here are not gonna come here, your new industry's not gonna come here, so you're gonna be stagnant. And growth is what's gonna make this county move forward, because the more businesses you have come in here, the less taxes the taxpayers have to pay here. It spreads that tax base out.
Mm-hmm. What stigma do you think is hanging all over the county right now, and the sheriff's department specifically?
I don't think there's people in this county that feel safe being here. And if I was coming into a county, I always look to see where I'm going. I plot my courses out in my travels, and people are not gonna come in here. And tourism's a big part of that too.
Okay. All right. Do you think what steps? I mean, you already have some preconceived notions, obviously, about school, and you have a lot of experience previously in the sheriff's department, even though you've been away for a few years. What specifically, or what you have some ideas, obviously, about where the department stands, not just based on these notions, but do you have anything specifically that you think you would change immediately?
Not immediately. Like I say, you have to evaluate to find out where you're at. Mm-hmm. You have your philosophies as a leader going in. You have to convey those philosophies to the people that work for you.
Sure. And
get them to buy into those philosophies. Once you do that, then you move the organization forward. Okay. And all these problems we're having are basically fueled by drugs. And you have to be more attentive to the drugs. I've walked neighborhoods in this whole county, I've heard complaints, and that needs to be one of your top priorities, finding these drug houses and start knocking them off one at a time.
Okay. All right. Mr. Kitchen, the next question is for you. Before we go any farther, tell us just quickly, in like a couple of minutes, your qualifications and your past law enforcement experience and what led you kind of to seek this office. You've got a lot of law enforcement experience to share with the viewers about your past career.
22nd July 1985, I walked in the front doors of the Columbia County Sheriff's Office as a deputy sheriff. I worked probably 5 years as a deputy, was later promoted to sergeant. That's where I started learning about the fundamentals and the importance of leadership. Through that, I progressed up through the ranks all the way to chief deputy. I've worked or supervised every department in that outfit. So I know the inner workings of the department. I know the cause and effect. Sometimes when you implement a good idea, there's always effects that you have to deal with. There's always reactions to your actions. Over that time, I've dealt with numerous incidents. I've acted in the role of sheriff several times in the absence of the sheriff. And at one time, there was even the loss of a deputy here that I had to deal with until the sheriff could return to town. We actually had a deputy that died in the line of duty. Now, those experiences overall made me a well-rounded leader, because you have to react to the circumstances you're dealt with. And you're not always going to be perfect, but you've always got to have the welfare of the department, the citizens, and the people that work for you in mind when you're making decisions that affect everyone. And you have to make the best decision possible. Under stress, you don't have days to think about it, weeks to think about it. Sometimes you just have seconds to think about it.
If you had to sum up your leadership style in just a few words, how would you define yourself as a leader?
I lead from the front, always have. I'm not gonna ask anybody to do anything that I'm not willing to do myself. And I'm not gonna set them up to take a fall for something that I had done. If I've done it, I've done it. And I've always been upfront, honest about it, and we move forward. You take the hit, you move forward, that develops a good leader.
Okay. Mr. Hunter, same question for you. Describe your experience as law enforcement from start of your career up to where you are today.
Well, I started in 1994 as a deputy over in Suwannee County. I actually worked in dispatch and then worked the road, worked as a school resource deputy, which is probably one of the gems within law enforcement where you can affect a lot of change with people. But after that, I went to work with the alcohol and tobacco enforcement with the state of Florida. Worked around the state with a lot of different sheriff's offices and other law enforcement entities, and understanding the importance of having those relationships. I wound up supervising the district office out of Gainesville. Still lived up here in this area, but supervised the Gainesville office. Then was the chief deputy for the previous sheriff, and then was elected sheriff. But I also did 30 years in the Florida Army National Guard, and started off at the bottom there, and worked my way up and retired as a lieutenant colonel. I had 2 commands while in the Florida Army National Guard, one at company level and one at battalion level. We stood that battalion up in 19 months and deployed 2 of those companies to war. Along with that, I didn't get into law enforcement until I was a little older. I worked with the Phosphate Mining Company for 13 years. And there again, I started at the bottom there and worked my way up into management. I was responsible for about a $12 million warehouse operation that supplied all the materials. So when we talk about, my experience, I think that's what I have to offer is a diverse experience. Along with that, I think that you can't just be in one area of law enforcement. When I got elected as sheriff, not only am I responsible for this county, but being able to bring assets. And when bad things happen here, especially us being in these smaller counties and these constrained counties, we have to have, we depend on other people. And like it or not, you can't be too proud to ask folks for additional assets. So I fostered a lot of relationships. I got involved with the Florida Sheriff's Association. I went through the ranks there and was the president of the Florida Sheriff's Association. So I was able to work hand in hand with other sheriffs and form those relationships and be able to get assets through the Sheriff's Association here that save taxpayer dollars. So, the experience I have is very multifaceted, and it's not isolated just to one arena. So I think that's what I have to offer.
In just a few words, sum up, in your own words, just a few words, what type of leader you are.
I'm a coaching mentor leader. And, I've had some of the best leadership training that can be provided, through the military, and I've been through a lot of law enforcement. I'm a graduate of the FBI Academy. And, the thing about leadership is that your job as a leader is to set people up for success. And you provide them the tools, you provide them the training, and the assets to get the job done. And at the end of the day, though, as sheriff, you're going to have people out there doing things. It's a 24-hour operation, and you set them up for success. But then when they fail, it's easy to fire people. A true leader looks at somebody and says, "You made a mistake," and you try to give them the ability to overcome that mistake, and they make better employees usually. Now, there's some that you're going to have to terminate, but my thing is that in our world, we have to make decisions in a snap, where everybody armchair quarterbacks that, immediately after, and especially with the social media. And that's the other thing as being a leader, you've got to listen to your people, and when your people they get tired, You gotta watch the people, and you gotta move them around, and you've got to challenge your people, and it's a tough job. There's a lot of moving parts with this job as far as being sheriff, and there's a lot of personality dynamics that you have to deal with. So.
Okay. It's more than a few words, but I appreciate it. It's all right.
Mhm.
Sheriff, next question, we'll start with you. All right, I want to delve into the 3 types of crime, and I broke it out. That's my version here. I want to talk about crime, but I want to break it out specifically and get a little more detailed about 3 different types of crimes that people are really discussing here in the county that we get feedback on.
Mhm.
Okay, so to start with, Sheriff, I'm going to start with you on the first one, Mr. Hunter. Let's talk about perception. We've already mentioned perception a little bit. Mr. Kitchens, you brought up perception, but I want to talk specifically about perception as something that we hear about. Public scrutiny of the sheriff's department, the street talk, says that crimes such as break-ins, property thefts, have very little chance of being solved and having property recovered in the remote areas of the county, despite the sheriff's department's efforts to solve these. Is this a fair statement, and is it accurate? And what steps need to be taken to help prevent and reduce these types of property crime in Columbia County?
Well, and that is a perception, as you say. And first, I want to address the perception part there. When he brought that up. When you talk about the county overall, what the perception he's talking about is the city of Lake City being stigmatized as being the worst crime city in the state of Florida, and that came from a property holdings group. And whenever we talk about trying to break that cycle of that perception, we're well on our way to that. We debunk that. They're using per capita numbers that out of a property holdings group in New York. They have a hand in this. They're trying to scare people from coming to Florida. Now, I know but if we're going to talk about the perception, I need to answer that. Per capita numbers, if you have 1 homicide, which is too many, but you have 1 homicide in Lake City, Florida, whenever you do that compare it to a Duval County, which has 1,330,000 in there, that's 108 crimes. That equals a per capita. So it's an unfair stigma, but it's there. Now, I will tell you this, we went through a lot, and when we talk about the property crimes, when you look at our numbers for the sheriff's office, we're solving crime at a higher rate. This is a fact, and you can take and pull individual cases out and all that, and do we get them right all the time? No, sir. But overall, we're solving crime at a higher rate than the state average, usually on about 7% higher than the state average overall. And you can break specific crimes out, and if you want the numbers, we can give you the specific numbers. But a fact is, we solve crime at a higher rate. Do we always get all the property back? No, we don't. But we work very hard, and we've done a good job. The guys and gals out there have done a good job. So property crimes, we stay after it, and it's also this embracing of technology. Things have changed in the last 9 years. The technology that we're using now with tracking stolen property, we put in place here where the things go into the computer. These deputies out here now have access to pawn tickets where we're actually recovering more material and more items that were stolen. They're actually able to access criminal records. We're geofencing with some of our technology to where that we can identify people that are going and coming. We're putting in flock cameras. That's a new thing that's going on. We've been working on that for a couple of years, trying to get those in place. I'm working hand in hand with the chief, because a lot of this stuff goes in and out of the county, goes from the city to the county. So we're working together on those things. And overall, there's going to be crime. And anybody sits here and tells you we're going to stop it all, they're giving you a falsehood. But overall, we are solving crime at a higher rate than the state average. That's a fact.
Right. Yeah, I understand that, and I'm not debating. The question doesn't come from the root of the internet scams and the New York property firms and all that, or the South Florida companies that try to scare people into buying security systems. I understand how they crunch the numbers and spend them for their own benefit and paint this out that you know, this is Columbia County and Lake City is an inner city. That we're not debating that. That's not where this is coming from. This is coming from the people who have their shed broken into.
But here's the other side of it. The technology side of it is part of the fix too. With these flock cameras that we're going to be getting around here, we're actually to track areas like when we have a burglary, we're actually able to track people that have been in and out there. And so if there's a suspicious person or vehicle in there, we're able to look at that. And so it does give us an upper hand to be able to solve crime. Those things are, we're working on that, and it's an ongoing process. And like I say, it's an ever evolving field that we work in.
Mm-hmm.
Criminals get smarter, we're working to get smarter as well.
Okay, so you mentioned it now several times. A flock, is that what you're saying? Flock, F-L-O-C-K,
Yes,
flock?
sir.
Okay, what is a flock camera? Because
Flock
nobody
cameras,
knows.
they have what's called a license plate reader system, and you've seen them around town. And this came up probably about five or 6 years ago. And the larger cities had started putting those in place. We looked at that, and they got a price tag with them, and there's a reoccurring price tag with them. And so, in looking at this technology, what it does is when we map out the county, you put these flock cameras up at your arterial roads where that you can monitor the traffic. It actually looks at license plates to where that we've had complaints about these people that run around without any insurance, their tags are expired or whatever. We can actually see those. If there's a deputy in the immediate area, they can identify that vehicle. If somebody's driving without a license, you can identify suspicious people. If we have a major crime in an area, we can go back immediately and look at those cameras to see who had been in and out of that area. It gives us an upper hand. And that's Big Brother. I don't like Big Brother, but I tell you what, in today's world, you better embrace it, because we've got to get ahead of this criminal activity.
Are these flock cameras in place now?
Yes, we've got 13. Well, the city's got 13 in place now. We've got 5. And we started up we actually got our contract in June. The chief and I had worked together, and I believe in October, it was in April of 23 whenever they got their contract signed. And what people have to understand, there's permitting that goes with this. We have to get DOT right-of-ways. There's a lot of things that goes in place. You don't just say, I want to put flock cameras in. There's a lot of things, and there's a lot of legal side to it that we have to follow. We can't just go out there and arbitrarily do something with that camera to spy on people. We have a court process that we have to go through, and that should be in place whenever we're dealing with this, because we're dealing with people's rights and rights to freedom to be able to move around. Right now, we've got, like I said, we've got 5. We've got 4 that we're working on now. We've got a mobile one that we can actually place in an area where we're having trouble to be able to monitor things that are going on there. These are things that have been in the works for a couple of years. So when you ask, what are we doing? We're preparing for the future with this.
Okay. Mr. Kitchens,
Would
the
you
same.
repeat the question
I
again?
certainly will. I certainly will. Yes, Mr. Kitchens, the same question for you. Perception. I want to talk about that. The public scrutiny, street talk says crimes such as break-ins, property thefts have very little chance of being solved and having property recovered in the remote areas of the county, despite the sheriff's department's efforts by road deputies to solve these. Is this a fair statement, and is it accurate? And what steps need to be taken to help prevent and reduce these types of property crimes in Columbia County? And please take your time to answer.
Let's talk about the state average for a minute. State average is probably 24-25%. I think ours is
Of solving crime?
Of solving crime. That's a quarter. I think ours right now is about a third, 33, 35%, somewhere in that range. So a third of the time you solve a crime. We need to do better. That's it. That's just the root case of it. We need to do better. We can always do better. The citizens are the one that actually suffer here. Law enforcement is at a deficit when they get the call, usually, because the crime has already occurred. We have to go out and investigate. We have to gather evidence, present a prosecutable case, and recover the property if we're lucky enough to recover it. Usually, on average, 50% of the property stolen is recovered. Now, with that being said, we need to strive to do better. You can embrace technology. You can have all these wonderful things, but it comes down to the citizens of this county. You need to be interactive with them. You need to know what's going on. You need to know who your bad guys are. Whatever legal means, you have to stay with the legal means to solve this. We're the good guys here. We want to maintain the good guys. Our integrity has to be top shelf, because when we get to court, we want to present these cases, we want to get convictions, and we want to remove these people from our community. That lowers your crime rate, because sometimes there are multiple people doing it. Sometimes single people are hitting the same things over again. Now let's talk about crime statistics. Crime statistics just changed. It used to be under the Uniform Crime Reporting System, and now they're under a new system, which I've tried to research, and I don't have really information to back up what they're doing now. But under the old system, I know this, that it was based on 1,000 residents per capita. Now, let's throw a few numbers out here for the year 2022 in this county and city. And I happen to have them right here. In the calendar year of 2022, there were 162 calls for service. This is in the city, shootings. 27 victims, 8 homicides. And this is from Lake City Police Department reports and public records requests that I have provided to you previously when I provided questions to you. In the county that same year, there were 4 homicides. So, and this, I encourage everybody to look out at this website, gunviolencearchives.org, and filter it with Lake City. This tells you what's actually happening with the violence in this community. Now, if you take those numbers and you figure them on a 12,000 to 12,500 population in one area, I would say those numbers are pretty accurate. I'm no mathematician, but just based on what I see here and gather. Now, you're talking strictly about property crimes in your question. Here's what fuels your property crimes. Your drugs are a major fueler of your property crimes, because people are going to do things that they need to do to support the habit that they have developed. So your drugs are mostly fuelers for your other crimes too. Some of your other major top crimes. And you have to prioritize that along with working your burglaries, your property crimes, your thefts, your crimes against persons, because any means necessary. This is a building process. You can't just walk in and wipe everything out. My goal here is to make it safer than what it is, and to employ knowledge, wisdom, and mentor some of these people and identify new leaders for the future. Because let's face it, I'm getting older, the sheriff's getting older, and we're not going to be around forever. But I have a vast knowledge that somebody needs to get, and we need to train these leaders to be refocused on principles of law enforcement. Everything changes. We have our ups, we have our downs, we have different things that happen that affect us. But we have to maintain integrity, and we have to maintain focus on our law enforcement principles, because at the end of the day, it's very simple. You have a crime, you identify the bad guy, you work the crime to the best of your ability, gather all the evidence you can, and present it to the court system. Our job is to go in and retrieve property and arrest the violator. It's not guilty or innocent. We do the best we can and provide them with the information.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Second part of the crime question, violent crime. Mr. Kitchens, random shootings continue to plague different parts of the county, and you touched on that a little bit with your statistics there. How will the Sheriff's Department work to prevent these in areas of county jurisdiction?
Well, the county jurisdiction is the whole county. It's not just the city of Lake City, not the city of Fort White. It's from the Georgia line to Alachua County line, Suwannee to Union. So we have to be interactive, we have to be reactive, and we have to be coactive with our citizens here and know what's going on. Now, I've touched on a little bit about the drugs fueling some of the crime. Well, drugs are fueling this too. I think that the majority of what I've seen is probably groups of drug dealers that are feuding between themselves, and when they get out here and start fighting over an area or a territory, as you want to call it, that innocent people get hurt. And we've all seen that. And we've seen the violence that's portrayed in our community. And you have to be one step ahead. You have to identify these people. You have to work your hardest to get them out of your community, whether it's arrest or you go down there and physically enforce the existing laws that you can enforce to make it uncomfortable, where it goes somewhere else or you arrest the violator.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hunter, the same question on violent crime. Random shootings continue to plague different parts of our county. How will the Sheriff's Department, under your continued leadership, work to prevent these in areas of county jurisdiction?
Again, you know, the city is in the county. I will definitely agree with that. The city's chosen to have a municipal police department, and we need to respect that and work with them, which we have. You look back in 2022, 2020, we did have some groups running around here. Now my opponent understands this. You can't just go out there and lock them up because of hearsay. It takes work, it takes time, it takes effort. And you build cases on these with some of your smaller drug charges, you stay after them, which we have. The majority of that group that he's referring to are either right now in prison or in the process of going. And I can tell you now, you think about this past year, the amount of shootings that we've had has gone to nil. Part of that is because of the flock camera system and to be able to do the response that we have. We actually put gunshot detectors on, I say we, the chief and I talked about it, but we geofenced using technology, geofenced some areas that were the higher areas of crime. We put those cameras in there, we put the gunshot detectors in there, and you see that it has gone down. Are there going to be shootings? Yes. You look at it, it's not just in Columbia County. You look around the surrounding counties, there was an uptick in violent crime. A lot of that had to do with the whole societal thing, with the defund the police movement, all of those things that hit us. When we talk about the drugs that are coming in, you know, they've got to close the border. That's a must. Drugs used to come into this country by the pound, it's coming in by the tons now. And we're on the front lines over here in these smaller counties struggling to keep up with it. The other thing is the drug trade has changed on the way they do business. They don't do the hand-to-hands much anymore. Most of the time now, it's over the phone. They have an app, and they'll send them the money, and they'll leave the drugs somewhere. So the old school methods of going out there and identifying the cars that are out there, that we could know who the drug dealers were, that's old school, trying to do those types of things. A lot of people don't even realize this. You can take your phone, there's an app on there that you can Uber your car for an evening. And so that's these drug dealers, they're Ubering cars at night. So you can't really sit out there and identify these vehicles that are doing stuff repetitively. They're changing up. We're having to change with that. Our guys are getting creative, and I'm not going to get into some of the tactics that we're using, but we're making significant drug arrests. The drugs coming in on the interstate. You know, you look at what we did, some of my guys on the HIDA team, which is a interdiction group, they wanted to do some additional training. We talk about training. I'm all about training, and I can give you numbers on training if you want. But they talked about, you know, Lowndes County up there, they're notorious for their interdiction that they have up there in their traffic enforcement. Our guys met one of them, and they were able to come down here and we had to do some legal stuff to be able to have them come down here. But we got over $1 million worth of cocaine off the hit the very next day after the 2-day training. And over that 3-day operation, it was significant. People say, well, why are you worried about that, Sheriff? It's going south. Well, let me tell you something. It goes south, they break it up, and then the mules bring it back up here. And it is affecting our community overall. So it's important that we bust up all of the rings. You start, you know, with these street level buys. It's the start of it. And a lot of these drug investigations take time. They take months, sometimes years, to get into some of the heavy hitters. We just popped several good rings here. We've slowed some of it down. You look at what we've done now. It's easy to look at it and point out the problems, but what's the fix? I can tell you now, we're doing a lot with technology. We're doing a lot with our training that we've got with our HIDA teams. And as far as building new leadership, when I said earlier about being a coach and mentoring type personality or leader, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to make sure that we set our agency up for success so that whenever I do leave, that there's no big hiccup. And whenever you replace a leader in an organization, it takes a while for it to pick up. And you know, when we talk about going in and assessing an agency, the assessments are done. I've had audits ever since I've been elected. It's mandated to know where we're at financially and physically. And you know, and I put the monies where we can that I'm allocated from the county commission to work out there. We are fighting the crime. The violent crime is down this year, and you can look. I mean, I can see it. It's down. When you talk about people feeling safe in the community, I've been out here door to door talking to people. And in the county areas, most of the people, they're leaving their cars unlocked. Their garage doors are open. They don't feel threatened out there. I've talked to a lot of people. But here's the problem. When you have a victim of a crime, it's traumatic. And you know, we're trying to bring closure to those people. But when they're affected by that, they're gonna talk about it. And it's going to get the news. It's going to get, you guys are going to put it in the paper. This happened, but we don't get the good stories of whenever we did recover the property or whenever we did solve the crime. So, you know, it is a perception, and it's something that we have to work on. And we are working with our community. We're embracing, you know, I want the people to know that this sheriff's office worked for them, and I believe that they trust us and they trust their sheriff. And you know, we just started our Citizens Academy to make sure that we can get people involved in it. And so, you know, it's an ongoing process. The fix is there, and it's going to evolve. Even if they did change out leaders, you're still going to have the same issues. The only difference is that we have it in place, and we are moving the sheriff's office forward as we speak. Okay. We don't have to have a startup time.
Okay. Mr. Hunter, the next question was for you on the third part of the crime question session here, and I think you just answered it, but I'll throw it out there again if you want to say anything else to it before I pitch it to Mr. Kitchings. It was about illegal drugs, and by being at the crossroads of I-75 and I-10, our geographic location most likely puts us in a proximity of frequent major drug trafficking routes. And we have seen that recently with some major arrests made of large shipments that weren't necessarily intended for us, but they were passing through and they were cracked down on. Traffickers may or may not stop or transfer drugs here, and we're not the intended target stop, but we have to be vigilant to know this evil could exist around us. And how do you prepare a rural sheriff's department for such an unknown challenge while at the same time battling street level narcotic sales or use? And you answered most of that, but is there, very quickly, 30 seconds, is there anything you want to add to that?
You know, we've had a HIDA group in place for many years before I even started here, which I thought was great. We've really embraced that. We get a lot of dollars from the HIDA group, and we do have a task force here that works on high profile drug operations, and there's a lot of things that go on behind the scene. You're exactly right. Whenever we talk about us being the gateway to Florida, we are. And, you know, and that's why we can't do it alone. That's why, you know, we have a DEA person on our task force. We have somebody who's cross-sworn with DEA. We've got somebody that's cross-sworn with the FBI. We've got somebody who was with the alcohol or the ATF. And these are all partnerships to where that we can actually run drug investigations at a higher level and get higher targets to prevent this stuff. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I don't know what more you can say other than we are working this currently.
Okay. Mr. Kitchings, thank you. Mr. Kitchings, the same question. Yes, sir. By being at the crossroads of I-75 and I-10, our geographic location most likely puts us in proximity of frequent major drug trafficking routes. Traffickers may or may not stop or transfer drugs here, and we're not the intended target stop, but we have to be vigilant to know this evil could exist around us. How do you prepare a rural sheriff's department for such an unknown challenge while at the same time battling street level narcotic sales and use?
Okay, I-75, I-10, State Road 93, State Road 8, 41, 441, 27, 90, State Road 10 is 90. All those kind of intersect right here in Columbia County. And it's nothing new. It's always been here. 1997, I was sent over to a group of guys. City, it started with the county and the city. Started a multi-jurisdictional task force. We incorporated DLE in it. We reached out to DEA. DEA finally came into it. We built it up. He's enjoying the fruits of those labors now, off of that group. The interdiction unit was started somewhere in that time frame too. So interdiction's not a new thing. We've got away from it over the years. But you have to have a balance. And you can't start at the top, you gotta start at the bottom. We can talk about technology, we can talk about how things change. I'm an adaptive person. I've had to change over 30 years from where I started to where I was. I've embraced technology. I'll sit in some of the same classes he did with some of the stuff that we're working today as far as technology wise. Now, has it increased? Is it advanced? Yes, but it is not something that you can't pick up on pretty quick and get back into the swing of things. Once you ride a bicycle, you never forget how to ride a bicycle. But you have to start with these lower level street dealers to advance up. You have to develop probable cause, and I'm not going to go into investigative techniques or anything like that to damage anything that he's got going or that we may have going in the future. But you embrace these investigative techniques, you use them, you stay within the guidelines of your Constitution, state law, and the state constitution. And you work these crimes diligently, you work them hard, and you get tenacious with them. And like I've said earlier, you either arrest the bad guy or you make it uncomfortable and they go somewhere else. And I don't care if they go to another county. And let's talk about these relationships we have with the other counties. You know, I can remember cases we've worked here. I think one of them was a homicide case, and the guy fled on us. We picked the phone up. We didn't have a contact down there. We called, got a hold of the guy. He jumped right in. That was one of the probably only counties we didn't have a contact in. I think it was Miami or Broward County. I don't remember the exact contact of it. But police officers are all formatted and focused the same way. They don't want this scourge in their community. And I don't want it here where I live, where I grew up, where I work. And I take it as a personal slap in the face when they come in here in our community, and we're working hard to make it safe for citizens like you and the other people in this county. But it's a daily process. You have to stay after it every day of your life, focused on it. And you have to have the people that are just as tenacious as you are out there working it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kissing's next question for you. Very current topic here in Florida. Proposed recreational marijuana use. It's on the ballot. Where do you stand on this ballot amendment to legalize recreational marijuana use in Florida, and why? And if it passes, how will this change the policing approach and the training at the Sheriff's Department, from a traffic stop training to the use of drug dogs, DUI testing, traffic stop, etc.?
Well, based on my beliefs and what I've seen over the years, it has always been illegal. Now, it is basically legal with a card. You can go with a prescription and get marijuana. Well, that legalizing it, if it's voted in by the citizens and they make it legal in the state of Florida, you're gonna have to retrain all your drug dogs. And you're not gonna retrain the dog that you've got. You're gonna have to start over, because that dog is already trained to detect the odor of marijuana. Now, before a couple of years ago, I heard they weren't even putting marijuana training in dogs anymore. Now, as far as the DUI detection, you're going to have to write a search warrant to get blood now, because there's no breath test for it. So you're going to have to write a search warrant on a traffic stop to get blood, to do a blood draw to affect the DUI arrest. And you can call it what you want to, a search warrant, a court order, but you've got to have some legal document to draw blood from that person to make that case. And that is, like we talked about earlier, one of the things you have to adapt to in law enforcement. It's ever evolving, and whether you agree with the law or you don't agree with the law, if it's voted in by the citizens, you have to abide by whatever the legislature sets forth on you. You have to interpret it, you have to abide by it, and you have to enforce it. And that's basically all I can say.
Right. But back to the question, as a law enforcement officer, no, I mean, I know you're retired, but you're still at the core, you're a law enforcement officer.
I'm against marijuana.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I thought I conveyed that with.
That's where I thought, but I wanted to hear you say it. That's where I thought you were headed, but I didn't want to put words in your mouth.
And let me say one other thing here. Back in the mid to late 80s, we worked a lot of large outdoor grows here. We dealt with booby traps. Most of your marijuana growers were local here, and they weren't real heinous individuals. They were growing it to make a living or to boost their economic status. But there were some out here that set booby traps for us. They would catch rattlesnakes, dig pits, throw rattlesnakes in the pits, pull the rattles off of them. And when we were going in, we had to deal with that. I have seen bear traps set for us going in. So your usual user is usually easier to deal with than a person on alcohol. But some of these growers were in it. They tang fish hooks too that catch you in the eye level. So you had to be real careful going in and navigate these things. So yes.
Okay. All right, same question, Mr. Hunter. Proposed recreational marijuana use on the ballot in Florida. Where do you stand on the ballot amendment to legalize recreational marijuana use in Florida, and why? And if it passes, how will this change the policing approach and training at the Sheriff's Department, from traffic stop training, use of drug dogs, DUI testing, etc.?
I will just right off the bat tell you I'm not for recreational use of marijuana. I'm in full support of medical marijuana, and I will tell you, this is something that we as an association, well, I say we as an association, the Florida Sheriff's Association is opposed to because of the impact it's going to have. If you'll think back, whenever it got put on the ballot several years ago, they talked about doing the recreational marijuana, and it got defeated. Now, look at Colorado, look at California. They're trying to beat it back now. And everybody says, well, gosh, look at the tax money that you're going to get off of it. You know, as sheriff, we have to make unpopular decisions a lot of times, and we have to live with it. But doing the right thing is tough, because you have some social things that go on. I understand the law, and if that's what the citizens choose to do, I will enforce the law accordingly. But here's the thing. You look out there at California and Colorado, what happens is you just created a new black market. And I've dealt with the drugs before. I've sat on marijuana grows. I've done all that as well. But I look at it from another side of it. I was a school resource deputy, and we start looking at the age that they start experimenting with. That age is going down, even with the medical marijuana cards that are out there. There's a lot of marijuana that's being moved around because people are getting more lax with it. The training that we're going to have to do, there is no presumptive test for DUI with marijuana now, and I concur with that. Now, I got all ideas though that if they do put this on the ballot, or they do make it into a law, they will take that restriction off as far as having to get a search warrant for the blood draws. That'll be a consequence of it, that they would, and we would fight for that, because there again, we don't want people out here impaired operating motor vehicles. It puts other people in jeopardy. So my short answer is, I'm not for recreational, because it does lead to a lower age level experimenting even more. We're seeing it now at 10, 12 years old. These kids are experimenting with some of the marijuana, and it does tend to be a gateway drug for other drugs. But I am in favor of medical marijuana, and my stance on this is that if somebody's at end of life, or they have a terminal illness, and something will make them feel comfortable, I'm all about it. Let them go out with some dignity, or let them, if that eases their pain, I'm okay with that. But to take the medical marijuana and then use that as a nexus to get to the recreational, I think that's a little unfair. I think that if you want to do it is let's legalize marijuana, put it on the ballot, let the people vote for it, and then we'll sort it out at the end.
Okay. Next question, Mr. Hunter, starting with you. What's the starting pay for road deputies in Columbia County? And why is it not higher, and why is it lower than smaller counties around us?
Okay.
And how are you gonna address this in the next term?
Well, here's the thing, our starting salary right now is $45,000.
Is that pay on the W-2? Is that pay?
That's $45,000 is on their check. That's the annual salary.
Okay, that's not
That is
benefits and anything else. That is dollars in their
That's
pocket.
$45,000 starting pay.
Okay.
But then when you start saying, well, these other counties are making more of their starting pay, we pay overtime. Well, the other counties don't. They do comp time, and there again, it takes money to be able to do that. So when these deputies come out and work, they get compensated for it, for doing the work in that paycheck. When their holidays, and these other counties book it as comp time, and they may get paid that year, or they may put it on there for a couple of years. When I first got elected, we were on that system, and I worked hard to get funds in there to make sure that we compensated our members to work. The other thing too is that labor law states that you can actually work, public safety folks, 171 sweat hours before they're entitled to overtime. And I don't think that's fair, but that's the law. You can do that. You don't have to. But I broke it down to where now at 84 hours, they're able to get compensation overtime for that. That costs money as well. The holiday pay, if they are off, they get paid for their holiday. If they're working that day, they get their regular pay plus their holiday. If they're called in on a holiday, they get their time and a half plus their regular pay. I mean, and the others, they don't do that. The other side of it too is that you look at the full benefit package, our insurance is a lot less than these other counties. Our deputies have not had an insurance increase in 9 years. In nine years. They have not had an increase on their insurance. That's a benefit. Their premium is lower than the other counties because of the insurance that we provide through the FSEBT. So when we talk about pay, some of these agencies are smaller than us. They don't have the complexity of compression. And when this was put out, it was disinformation that was put out that our deputies didn't get a pay raise. Well, in 22, they got an $8,000 pay raise through appropriations money that me and there's 29 constrained counties. When they started doing the state pay raises, we went to Tallahassee, and all this was done in about 3 weeks during legislative process, which is unheard of. But we said, look, you're fixing to see a lot of folks leave out of this rural county areas, and we're going to be hurt. You're going to hurt law enforcement. We got that money, $8,000. Now, here's another thing. I pay the detention deputies at the same rate that I pay the road deputies. These other agencies don't do that. And I think that the deputies that are working in the jail, and let me tell you, when I first came into office, we had a problem. We couldn't staff the jail because the state workers were making more money. I fought for money for our detention deputies to get their pay up so that we could staff. I mean, there's a lot more to it than just that number. And I know you work people, they look at that number and say, well, they're making $47,000 over there. Well, are they? If you look at the full benefit package for the individuals, but it's more money in their pocket by the year end, the way we do it.
Okay, so with that overtime, what's the average deputy make the first year? How much overtime do they make?
It depends on the deputy. I mean, we have different things where we have off-duty details that they pay. That's another thing that we do. We actually run that through the sheriff's office, and the off-duty rate is $50. We pay them their overtime rate for the off-duty. We run it through the sheriff's office so that at the end of the year, they don't get a 1099 from the IRS and then have to pay all the taxes at one time, and it gets very confusing. The other thing too is that goes into their compensation for their retirement. And a lot of the other agencies don't do that. So when they see that another agency got a check, this guy got a check from the vendor for X amount of dollars, well, I only made my overtime rate. Well, that's because you got the benefit of that going towards your retirement.
Okay, Mr. Kissich, what are your thoughts on that? What's the starting pay for road deputies, Columbia County, and the whole salary plus overtime, 45,000? And what's your take on that compared to other counties?
Well, based on the public records I pulled, base salary is what they pay you to do your job for an X number of hours for your tour of duty. When I started in 1985, we were working 60 hours a week, 6 10-hour days, $13,000. That was in 1985. Somewhere in that process, Garcia came in, the Garcia ruling, which is a labor law ruling, that says you cannot work more than 171 hours in a 28-day cycle without getting compensation. So they compensated you with comp time. And, you know, the counties weren't real, back in that day, didn't have the means to pay the overtime. Overtime is just that. That's over and above what you work. Your special detail or your ODE, off-duty employment, that's extra. That's your earning extra money. Now, Sheriff Hunter addressed that going into their retirement. That didn't just start under Sheriff Hunter, and neither did the equal pay for the correctional officers or detention officers at the jail, the detention deputies. That started under several sheriffs ago, and it was maintained all the way through. But here's the bottom line. Your employees are your biggest asset as far as making you successful, making your department successful, and making your county safe and taking care of the citizens of this county. And you have to fairly compensate them for their duties and their struggles and their sweat hours out here, because this is not an easy job. It is a high stress job. Now, with all that being said, we're the largest geographical county in this judicial circuit. We're the largest population in this judicial circuit. And it's a shame that our deputies are compensated at a lower rate than some of the other agencies in here. Now, let's talk about the appropriations money that has come in here that boosted them up. I understand the precept behind it. I understand the principle, and I think it was a wonderful idea for them to get together and band together, because they were fixing to be bare bones. But here's the bottom downside to that. When this governor goes, or this legislature goes, you have a shift in power, that's all gonna be reverted back to the county level. And our taxpayers are gonna have to foot that bill for it. Now, you're either gonna cut salaries, which you're not gonna be able to do, or you're gonna have to sustain. And you have to sustain an organization, and you have to move forward like we've talked about here. In every question you've asked me, we have to keep moving forward, and we have to look at ways, be creative. You know, if you have end of year money, you're now not constrained. You can put it back to your deputies in a bonus. If you keep having the same amount or similar amounts, then it's reoccurring and your budget keeps going up. From what I've looked in these numbers, the budget of the sheriff's office keeps going up each year. That could be inflation, that could be just other factors involved in it. But if you have the same reoccurring money, there's no reason you can't put this in salaries and call it reoccurring. And you know, your people fight for you, or should fight for you. You have to get out there and fight for your people and get them fairly compensated, because that's what we want. We want to maintain the best, the brightest, and the most experienced we can to reduce the crime level in this county.
But if you're elected, Mr. Kitchens, if you're elected, do you intend to stay with the current system of salary plus overtime? Or are you going to revert back to the comp time system that was in place previously? Because apparently in the years you worked for the sheriff's department, you worked under both systems?
I worked under both systems. Here's the downside to comp time. You have to maintain paying your employees. Comp time is the gift that keeps on giving, because you get it, it keeps building. And if you're understaffed, it keeps building. You never get ahead of it. So you're far better off. You're far better off to pay your employees up front and be done with it and move on to the next problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got to cut costs somewhere else, you take care of your employees.
Okay, so you would stay with the current
Yes,
system?
sir.
All right, so what would you do? What do you, if you think, am I following you correctly? You think the employees are underpaid?
Yes,
as
sir.
deputies? Okay, what would you do to raise that starting pay?
Well, you'd have to go in and assess your budget, see where you're at, see where your expenditures are, do a study over the past few years to see what you've done. And I'll have the numbers of the monies that were returned, I provided them to you. And, you know, that in itself, just one-time lump sum bonuses would have helped those employees. It might not have helped their retirement, but anything you can run through their retirement is the best thing you can do, because the carrot's not at the beginning, it's at the end of the rainbow. And you wanna live well in your retirement years, because let's face it, this is a high-stress job. Law enforcement officers' life expectancy after they retire is not real great. I think the last average I read was about 5 years, which some of them do beat the averages. And that's based on the type lifestyle. You're not eating good, you're not exercising properly, these rotating shifts. These medical studies show that it reduces your life expectancy over the years. So we need to look after them, we need to take care of them the best we can, and we need to compensate them. And you know, nobody's gonna get rich in this business, but there's no reason why they can't have a fair wage.
Okay.
I do need to rebut something on this. Whenever he talked about the appropriations money, when they sent the money over, though, there were restrictions on that money. And it goes back to the detention deputies. They were only wanting to start them at 43, and in 22 they only wanted to start them at 43, and the road deputies got 45. And so in order to facilitate everyone being able to be compensated at the same, we went with 43, and then we went back the following year to get the 45. And I understand when you talk about doing a review of the budget, 83% of our budget is personal services. That only leaves me about $3 million to buy equipment and stuff. And you can look at and up until 2 years ago, I was not able to move the money from what we call the silos. There's 3 silos. There's law enforcement, judicial, and the corrections budget. And I was not able to cross-pollinate that. There was a big court case about that. We took it to the legislature. They got that changed. So it was only up until 2 years ago that we were able to move monies around. Now, he's picked those last years before that happened, and this last year we only returned like $100-something thousand. So my thing is that, am I going to use those monies? Yes, but then again, when we've cut the budget, the operational monies to the bare bones, you ain't got much left. And like last year, when we talk about inflation, when your cars, I mean, when I first started with this, we only had $100,000 to buy cars. So I kept putting money in there to where we needed to replace 10 cars, actually 12. So we had the money in there to do 10 cars over a period of years. We were able to obtain those funds. Right now, cars last year went up 32%. The material that goes inside of them to trick a car out for road, 24%. So when you start talking about we're going to look at monies in other areas to move over into salaries, then you're going to put them back in substandard equipment. You know, these things have already been looked at, and I have gone to the commission. I'm the first one up there. I turned my budget in June the 1st, and I asked for what is needed and necessary to do the job. And we don't always get what we want from the commission. Now, we've had, and y'all have covered the budget battles and all that. And yes, I would have liked to have had additional funding this year to have gotten us up to that 47,000. But I got what we got. We implemented. The other thing too is we have a step pay plan, and that these other agencies don't have a step pay plan. They get what they call across the board raises. So every employee there is on a step plan. Every 2 years they get a bump, and I've worked hard. We've maintained that over these years. It's been a bone of contention, but I just think that helps separate and does help with morale as far as keeping people because they are getting compensated for their experience and their loyalty to the sheriff's office.
Good. Mr. Kitchings, back to you. And what's the biggest point of contention you have with a campaign statement that your opponent is making out there on the campaign trail or in some of his literature or anything, and how would you like to refute it here in this forum?
Well, the only thing that I can think of right now is the information I put out. He's referring to it as false information. The false information that I'm gathering is either provided by him or the Board of County Commissioners. So my numbers are what I have received, and that's what I'm putting out. And I'm putting out real numbers, I'm not putting out percentages.
What are you talking about specifically? The numbers you put out that he's saying is false? What is
Well, let's talk about the crime rate. That's false information. Well, that's everywhere you go. And I've explained how you get to those numbers. And something else about the budget process here. If you look at any budget, 78 to 85% is gonna be salaries, because that's your biggest resource. And you have to consider in these budgets that going in it. And your employees, like I said earlier, are your best asset.
Okay. Mr. Hunter, same question for you. What's the biggest point of contention you have with the campaign statement your opponent's making, and how would you like to refute it here?
Well, I think it's, I call it disinformation. And when I call it disinformation, he says he got the numbers from us and from other areas. It's how you put the numbers out there. It's no different than what they did to our city, calling us the worst crime. Per capita numbers, whatever percentages, I use this, I use that. But the fact is, whenever they talk about, he threw a number out there, 225 people left the sheriff's office over this period of time. You're correct, that is true, they did. But when you look at a business operation, and I got this from the military, and I can tell you from day one when I came in, it was about retention. Because in the military, you have to have a certain manning level in order to be able to carry out your mission. 85% was the rule of thumb. And I put that in our policies, that we're going to work hard to maintain 85% of retention. I've maintained that every year since I've been in office. Now, talk about all the people leaving. Well, he's one of those that was included in the retirement part of it, 9 years ago. Now, when you start looking at here recently, even after COVID and whatnot, look at our retention rate. 89% retention of employees. That's a fact. 89%. There's going to be natural attrition in any business that you operate. And it's just like he said earlier, we're not going to be around forever. People are going to retire. And that's not just the law enforcement people leaving. That's you've got support staff, you've got part-time people. I include all of those numbers. I'm not hiding anything. Last year, we had a 92% retention rate of employees. This year, we're on track to have over a 90% again. So when we put out here about the retention and the morale and the people are leaving, I feel that's a little bit dishonest. And that's part of this whole political process. I get it. It's how do you want to twist the numbers to benefit your campaign? So I just think that we ought to be honest, Dave. The men and women of this sheriff's office have worked hard. I've been very, as far as the budget goes, it's unfair that he wants to talk about the monies that I turned back in when it was restricted up until 2 years ago. And then whenever we get to where we can actually use those monies, I'm held to certain budget line items within that. 368 line items in a budget that you have to work through. And yes, is there going to be year-end monies? I don't care what business you are. You guys at the end of the year, when you have a $20,888,000 budget, you're going to have receivables at the end of the year. You have to balance that budget. If you were under this requirement, you have to balance that budget to the penny. And I am required still by law to turn that over to the county commission at the end of that budget cycle. By law. And then I have to ask for it back. So when I look to see, you're going to have receivables coming in at the end of the year, September the 30th, you have to close the books. You can't hold on to that money anymore. You balance, and you're required to turn it back in. I think we did a pretty good job, this last year. There's been some years that I operated at less than 1% margin on our budget, but they don't want to talk about that. And we had a lot that went on. And you think about COVID. When COVID hit, everybody was affected. We lost a lot of people. There was a lot of vacancies. those monies had to be turned back into the county commission by law. And so when you want to inflate those numbers, I think it's a little bit disingenuous and you know, to point that out. We have worked through that, and I'm proud of where we're at right now. In the last 3 years, we're retaining employees. We've got people, we've got applications coming in now, and things are looking really good for the sheriff's office. So, I mean, and I understand it's the political process, and I'm not going to say anything bad about Mr. Kitchens, but you know, been gone 9 years. There has so much changed, and this technology is so advanced. And when you say I'm going to play catch up coming in here, you know, how long is it going to take to catch up? We're ready to go to work day one. We're already there. We're already working.
Okay, thank you. All right, last question, and then we'll get to your closing statements. There was a time when you guys were extremely tight. You were the 1-2 punch in law enforcement in this county. Some of the best. You guys were arguably the best maybe in the history of the sheriff's office in this county. Extremely tight, good friends. You worked very well together. Now the relationship is maybe a little strained, shall we say. Will there be a time after this is over, regardless of who wins, where there will be mutual law enforcement respect regained for each other? Mr. Hunter, the question is to you.
I would certainly hope so. This is a process, and you know, and that's what I'd like to say to the people out there. You know, I get it. I'm not going to say anything bad about Wally. I'm not. We've been through a lot together, and I respect his right to step up and want to do this. Just wish he would have done it a lot sooner. But you know, this is a process to get through. We have mutual friends, and that's the tough part about the political process. You know, voting for somebody because they're a good guy, that's just part of this process, and it sometimes tends to be a popularity contest. But if you take the resumes and you put them up and you put them there,
Okay,
then look at it.
Hold on. All right, Mr. Kitchen, same question for you. You guys were, you know, in this county's history of law enforcement, you guys were the 1-2 punch. You were a couple of the best we've ever had in this county. You know, worked very well together. You know, you guys spun off of each other, knew what was going on. One knew what the other was doing. You were the 1-2 punch, solving crimes, and worked very well together. Now the relationship is strained. It's been a very passionate campaign, shall we say, out there. Will there be a day when you guys can, be friends again and show a mutual law enforcement respect for each other after the dust settles and this campaign moves forward past election day, and somebody's going to win and somebody's not going to win? But will there be a time down the road where, you know, that you guys can be friends again and show mutual respect for each other?
I harbor no ill will against anyone. I still think of the sheriff as the sheriff. I address him as so. He right now has earned that title. And that's the way I felt with every sheriff I've worked for. I have no ill will against any of them. Some I like better, some not as well. But I respect him for what he's done and what he's doing. It's just time to move forward and get away from complacency and get some new ideas and some fresh ideas in there and see if we can't turn this county around and make it what it needs to be again. Not that I think it's a bad place now, but I think it can be better. I think it can be safer.
Okay.
And that's fair assessment. I think the world of Mark.
All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. Gentlemen, that concludes the questions. We went way more than a half hour, but I think the answers were fantastic. You guys got into some things that were very poignant issues, very much timely issues for the county. for the readers, for our viewers who will see this. So we went way more than a half hour, and I appreciate that. Now we're going to move to the closing statements. I want you guys to get to 2 minutes to each of you, okay, where you can address your qualifications. You're going to speak right to the camera, to the voters, and say whatever you want, ask for their votes and everything like that. It's a 2-minute closing statement, okay? So Mr. Kitchings won the coin toss, he deferred, so he gets the last word, okay? So Mr. Hunter, you get to go first, okay? And then Mr. Kitchings will close us out. So Mr. Hunter, you have 2 minutes to speak to the voters, give them your closing statement, and tell everybody who you are, talk about your resume, your accomplishments, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. You know, I've been here 15 years as the sheriff of Columbia County, and I'm very proud of our Columbia County Sheriff's Office and the accomplishments that we've made. We've still got work to do. I won't deny that, but whoever sits in this chair will have a lot of work to do. We're well on our way to making things a lot better, and I just want to continue what we've got in place. You've heard me talk about the things that we're moving towards, this technology, making sure that we're staffed properly, trying to make sure that the employees are taken care of and this community is taken care of. I know that in being out there door to door and at our different rallies that we've had, you know, the support that we've had, it's humbling, I will tell you that. And even though there may be, you know, some disinformation out there, I still believe that we've done you a fair job. I would ask that you give me the opportunity to continue to be your sheriff, and come August the 10th through the 17th, please get out there and early vote. If you can't make it then, August the 20th, that'll be the day. Please cast your vote and stand with your sheriff, Mark Hunter.
Okay, Mr. Hunter, thank you very much for that. Mr. Kitchings, now you have the last word of the forum for the sheriff's candidates. You have 2 minutes to address the voters. Go ahead, sir.
This has been a great process to go through. I've had a great career here. I love this community. I love the people in this community. And I'm gonna continue to be in this community. I think it's time for a change in the sheriff's office so that we can make this community safer. I look forward to getting out there and being your sheriff, but I need your support. So on or before August 20th, please vote Kitchens for sheriff. Thank you very much, and thank you for your time.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate everybody that stayed with us to the end. I hope everybody gained something from this forum. This is the Lake City Reporters 2024 Candidate Forum. We're here today with our Columbia County Sheriff candidates, Mark Hunter on the left and Wallace Kitchings on the right. Gentlemen, you did an excellent job today. We appreciate everyone watching, staying with us today. I am Todd Wilson, the publisher of the Lake City Reporter. I'm the voice with the questions behind the camera. And Jamie Wachter, our editor, has been our cameraman today, working behind the scenes here. And we do appreciate your time and your effort that you have put into this campaign and just getting involved. And both of you have dedicated your lives to law enforcement. We thank you for the service that you have given to just the people of this county. You both are lifelong residents here, and we thank you for your service and your willingness to step up and run for office. So good luck to both of you, and thank you very much for coming in today and speaking with our readers and our viewers here on Facebook and on our website. So good luck, gentlemen.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.